Hello there, and welcome back to the Donor Centric Approach. This podcast is brought to you by MRP Donor Development, where we help ministries and nonprofits thrive by putting donors at the heart and center of everything that we do. This podcast is also brought to you by our friends and sponsors at Stellar Web Systems, the nonprofit tech solution. As always, I am your host, Orlando Barros, and I am so incredibly grateful for you, excited and glad that you're here, and super pumped for this now episode number 2 of our show and what we're going to be covering today. Just actually pretty cool, I think. Today, we're going to be diving into a topic that is not only, in my opinion, critical for your mission, your ministry, and your organization's success, but also something that I just happen to be or to have been discussing a lot lately because of the time of year. At the time of this recording, we're in the middle of January. By the time this show or this episode goes live, we'll still be in middle of February sometime. So in the throes of quarter one. And the topic is how to build the right strategy for your annual development and fundraising campaign. What is that plan? As a matter of fact, I actually just hosted a webinar on this very topic. And I was really moved and humbled by the response. Prior to the webinar, I received some really great answers. A lot of people, because I think really because of the time of year and how timely the topic was, actually signed up for this webinar. I received some great questions during the presentation, and afterwards, just the communication and the comments and the emails I've received were really uplifting. So I wanted to bring that same conversation into the podcast and share these insights with you, because really now, there's no better time to get your donor development plan in place for the year ahead in 2025. So the way that the show's going to run today, we're going to start by discussing why an annual development plan matters, why it's so important for you to have one to begin with. We're going to be talking about the correct steps to building one that actually works for you and your organization. And we're going to be sharing some real world examples of how different ministries and nonprofits we have had the honor of working with in the past have been able to transform their fundraising results through simple, clear, and strategic planning. Of course, the goal is to leave you at the end with a few actionable takeaways and tips that you can start using right away, today, at the time of that you're listening to this recording. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start by discussing the importance of an annual development plan. Some of the stuff that I say, if you've been in the nonprofit space for a while, especially in development, your tendency may be, why doesn't everyone have one? Or that development or business 101. The truth of the matter is that the overwhelming majority of nonprofits have or go through a lot of the challenges and questions and problems that we will be discussing on the show. That's the reason this podcast exists. So if you feel like, hey, I have one, or I'm already doing those things, good on you, first of all. But even if you do, or even when you have some of these things that we'll be discussing preset in your organization and in your mission, it's worth listening to how other people have been doing it, which we discuss in every episode, and even ways that you can improve your own systems and the way that you do things. So again, why having an annual development plan for your organization, for your mission is important. And let me set the scene by asking you this question. Have you ever felt, or do you currently feel like your fundraising efforts are reactive rather than proactive? And a couple of ways that I can sort of explain that, or some analogies that I can bring, would be like, for example, do you ever feel like you just go into work or open up your laptop or go into what your to-dos for the day are as a development officer or an executive director, and you just go, well, let's see what's in store today. Who do I have to call? What am I going to do? Or even worse, what new need just suddenly appeared that fits your mission, that seems so urgent, or in fact is so urgent that you have to take care of it right there on the spot. If you've ever found yourself, or if you still find yourself at times scrambling to raise money because of a new fire that needs to be put out, or you're just going from chaos to chaos, you only reach out to donors when there's like an urgent need or campaign, I just want to affirm you for a second and let you know that you are not alone. You will be surprised how often this happens. And I will venture to say that the majority of nonprofits go through this stage or this feeling quite often, if not every day. It happens all the time in the nonprofit world, in nonprofit space. The big issue, though, when we operate this way is that a couple of things. First of all, it is not a sustainable way to function in development at all, because you need to remember that fundraising and development is a long haul, long-term process. Everyone wants that super quick solution or the magic bullet that's going to change everything for your organization. I'll tell you what, I'm sorry, but you're not going to find it. You're not going to find it. So if you are currently feel this way, I'm glad that you're here. Or if you felt that way, I'm glad that things are getting better, because this is not a sustainable way to act. It's going to lead to donor fatigue and exhaustion. Why? Because donors can start to feel, when you're operating this way, like they're just ATMs rather than actual, or what they are, where they should be feeling, true partners in your mission. It's a huge problem, because donor retention, making sure that your donors don't go away. Obviously, without your donors, you wouldn't be here. You can't do what you do. Is key and is the most important thing for this long-term process and for long-term success. The most successful nonprofits, especially those that don't rely on big grants or big government funding, big grantors, one or two grant-making organizations, the most successful nonprofits that deal with individual donors, they're not just out there constantly chasing donors or new donors, or asking them all the time. What they're doing is that they are cultivating prospects, they are stewarding current donors, they are able to retain a big percentage of their donors year over year, and they are growing the support of the donors that they already have. Why? Because they likely have a structured, simple to follow strategic development plan that works. And that's why it matters to have one for you. So here are some things that having a good plan allows you to do. First of all, setting clear and achievable goals for your fundraising and development efforts. Those come from knowing your mission, believing in it, and knowing what you need to accomplish in order for it to move forward and thrive. Secondly, having a clear plan allows you to develop a consistent stewardship strategy so that you are able to keep your donors engaged all year round. And they don't feel like you're only hitting them up or that they only hear from you the one time a year. They only hear from you when you need money, right? Having a set plan, finally, is going to allow you to be proactive. And by the way, you're just going to feel so much better. You're going to feel like a big old weight is lifted off your shoulders because you're not reacting to anything or everything that comes your way today. Having a proactive fundraising approach comes from having a plan, and it's just so beneficial. So let's talk about how to actually build a good plan for you and for your mission. A good, solid development plan for your year is not just about setting a random goal, or even if it's not random, just putting the goal out there and hoping for the best. Okay, we raised $300,000 this year, last year, so this year we're going to raise $500,000. Okay? How are you going to do that? Who's going to pay for that, right? Having a solid plan, solid fundraising development plan, it's about building a strategy that supports that goal, a strategy that guides that goal. And here are 5 key steps to doing just that. As you listen to these steps, you're going to notice that one builds on the next. So let's start with the first step, defining your goals. Before anything else, you need to be able to be specific about what you want to achieve this year. Some of us use the calendar year as our fiscal year. Some of us start the fiscal year on July 1st. At whatever time you are starting your development plan, make sure that you're clear and specific about what you want to accomplish and achieve. Now, why this is important right now in quarter 1 of the calendar year is because normally, because of the way that our tax system works in America, I'm mostly speaking to American nonprofits and ministries, the donors think in December 31st at midnight as the deadline for them to give and to get a tax deduction, right? So there's a tendency to think that, that's the end of the year. But even if your fiscal year starts July 1st, again, as you begin the year, you want to get specific. So instead of saying just, hey, what are you going to do this year? We just need to raise more money. Okay, no problem. How much do you need? When do you need this by? And what do you need this money for? Those are the questions that are going to guide your goals. Let me give you a good example of this. That's simple and it's clear. Our goal this year is to increase our monthly donor base by 25% by December 31st of 2025. When you hear that, what do you hear? Like, you know exactly what you're going to do because that's a clear, measurable, and actionable goal, right? Define your goals. Number 2, once your goals are defined, now know your donors. That's step number 2, knowing your donors. Understanding who your donors are, what they can do for you Understanding who your donors are, what they can do for you, is going to allow you to craft a plan that truly and actually speaks to them, where they can see that they, again, are part of they're partners with you, part of the mission, not just people who just give you money. So things that you want to do to understand and get to know your donors. One, again, this is like a subtopic within step number 2, segmenting your donors. And there are a bunch of different ways that you can do this. Here's my lower tiers donors, like less than $1,000 or less than $100. This is my mid-tier donors, $250 to $1,000. My high-tier donors are my major donors, right? Interest. Do they particularly like a fund within your organization? Do they support one particular cause only? Or are they motivated by several of the things that you do, right? Another way to segment it is by engagement, right? Do they rather have email correspondence with you? Do they like to know, if they're a monthly donor, do they like to receive a thank you letter every time, right? Do they give quarterly? Do they give one time a year? Do they only give to your annual donor gathering or event? Different ways to segment your donors. Another tool that you can use that can actually help you in getting to know your donors is identifying who your ideal donor is by creating a donor profile or a donor persona, right? Questions to ask yourself: who are my most engaged donors? Who are the ones that love us the most? And how can you deepen that connection? Are they married? Are they single? Do they have grandchildren? Are they working? Are they retired? All these questions, right? They're going to allow you to deepen that connection. Or you can even go a step further and say, who would I want my ideal donor to be? And then sort of go from there, right? Again, different ways to identify your donors, getting to know them, segmenting. And one good one, or another good tip, using past donor behavior to inform that strategy, right? So let's say, for example, do your mid-level donors respond well to phone calls versus handwritten notes or email correspondence? I'm using those examples again. Whatever way that they like the most, prioritize that, right? If major donors engage better at in-person events rather than a Zoom call, plan accordingly. Know your audience, know your donors. I'm going to cap it at that. I can go on forever. Step number 3, define your goals, know your donors, map out your touch points throughout the year. Your donors, again, you don't want them to feel like they only hear from you once a year or only when you need money. Your donors should feel like they're hearing from you regularly, like they know what's going on within your organization. At a very minimum, I would plan quarterly touch points with your different donor segments. You can vary the communication per quarter, right? If this is the minimum you're doing. Or you can do some A/B testing where like your mid-level donors get a handwritten note and your major donors get like a personalized video, right? And maybe you do the opposite, and you do this quarter 1 and then you do the opposite quarter 2, right? Do different communications. Don't just use the same thing every time. That's all I'm needing. Whether that's annual impact updates or personal phone calls, donor appreciation events, as long as it's intentional and genuine and high impact, a really powerful touch point. Don't fall into thinking that your email appeal, your thank you note after making a gift, and your letters of support or newsletters only with an ask are a touch point. That's not a genuine touch point. That goes out to everybody or to a large group. Again, I'm talking about that individualized approach. Plan that accordingly. Define your goals, know your donors, map out your touch points for the year. Make sure that you craft the right ask. How do you go about this? Making sure that your ask, or what makes a strong ask, is a specific ask tied to the impact that the donor is making. For example, instead of simply saying, please donate today to support our mission, maybe you want to think about framing it this way. A $50 gift provides a week of meals for a family in need. $200 supports an entire month of care for that same family. Right? Right? Clear, direct, and impact driven. What was most important about that or this kind of ask, those really good ask, is that you're not just sharing your needs, you're allowing the donor to see what their generosity, what their support can do. Completely different, right? It's not saying, we need to feed 1,000 families this year. Hey, $200 feeds one family for a home, right? Clear, impact driven, and very direct. And then lastly, after crafting the ask, so again, you've defined your goals, you know your audience, you know the touch points throughout the year, you've mapped them out. You have the right ask for the individual donors, for the appeals, for the campaign, for the event. Measure and adjust. This is really important. Track your progress and your efforts throughout the year. Review often. If possible, review every day. Know your numbers in and out. It's only going to allow you to know what's working and what's not. Hopefully, you have a CRM in place. Make sure that you're getting the most CRM out of your CRM. So use that data to analyze things like donor retention, things like given trends, things like month-to-date income, things like year-to-date income, right? If something isn't working that you're able to measure because you're keeping track, pivot. Your development plan needs to allow itself to be flexible and responsive, not reactive, right? Make sure that you're able to respond to something and change it as opposed to reacting to a sudden need. So let's talk about some real life examples. I want to share with you a quick story about a nonprofit that I had the honor of working with that really transformed their fundraising efforts by following a similar approach to what we just described, having an actual development plan in place. I said I'm making up. No, like I've seen it. I've lived it. So this particular client had been relying on this, reactive, winging it approach of fundraising strategy. They were just scrambling every quarter to make sure that their budget is being met. Donors felt 100% disengaged. They may have been moved once to give, but there were donors that were really interested 5 years ago. We found out that nobody ever followed up with, right? And year over year, sometimes you would see it month over month because monthly donors were dropping off. The retention rates were declining. So once we were able to analyze the trend, thankfully, we were able to pull enough information from their data and their CRM. We were able to work together to implement, it was simple, but it was structured, an annual donor engagement plan. Things that we did, we segmented their donors, right? We needed to know who we were communicating with. We planned personalized touch points and a personalized approach to different segments. And we created strategic efforts around the different asks that we wanted to make. And by just simply doing that, within just 1 year, 14 months, their donor retention rate increased by 30%. Their monthly giving program almost doubled in size. and they were no longer, or at least they started to feel like they were not only fundraising from a place of panic, but really from a place of strength. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You have the power to make this work. And it can be really simple, but you have to stick to it. That's the key. That's the secret sauce. Stick to it, and it will work. So, if you take anything else from this episode, let it be the following 3 quick action steps that you can start today. The first one, define one smart fundraising goal for 2025. Be clear and be specific. You can do that. I know you can do that. Number 2, map out at the very least 2 to 3 meaningful donor touch points for the next 6 months. Personalized approach, donor centric. Think of how the donor is going to feel when receiving this. Whether it's an email, a handwritten note, a check-in call, or even a video message. Plan it out and start working towards it. And then lastly, review your last 5 fundraising asks. Whether that was through an appeal, an email campaign, in person, after giving a tour of your facilities, on a donor gathering, on a fundraising event. Were your asks specific? Did they highlight the impact the donor was making or could make? And if not, refine them. Put yourself in the donor's shoe and ask yourself, what is my money doing? Or what can I do with my support, as opposed to just saying what the needs of the organization are. Very simple, very quick. You should be done within an hour planning this out. Very small, but very strategic. And these tips, these shifts can make a huge difference in your fundraising and development approach this year. Sound good? Awesome. I truly hope that this has been helpful for you. If by going through this, you feel a little overwhelmed, or if you feel like you may need a little bit more guidance in building your annual development plan, or even doing these 3 things that we just discussed, the 3 tips, let's talk. I'm open to talking with you. I would love to help you fine-tune your strategy and make this year, 2025, I want to make this year your best, or I want to help you. I would love to help you make this year your best fundraising year yet. I'm going to have the link in the show notes to schedule a one-on-one call with me. Simply go to mrpdonordev.com, MRP donor, DONOR, DEV for development, DEV.com. mrpdonordev.com. Go towards the bottom of the front page, and you'll see our Calendly there with our availability. Click one of those times and just let's talk. It doesn't cost you anything. And I love to meet you or at least virtually, and see if we can make this work. And again, if you enjoyed this episode, you found it fruitful, you found it helpful, my gosh, it would mean the world to me if you can share with a colleague or a friend who you believe might find it helpful too. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, this podcast, on the different platforms for YouTube, so that you don't miss an episode. And again, thank you. I'm so glad and grateful that you're here. Thank you for joining me on the Donor Centric Approach. And remember always that your donors are at the heart of everything that you do. Let's put them first, and let's see what we can do. Let's see what's possible. Take care. You're awesome. You're amazing. God bless.